Hi, my name is Natalie Walker and this is my story on engineering before going freelance. This video supplements my CV, which you can download on my About page on my website. This is the first video in my 3-part work blog on my experience to date. The second video is about my freelancing projects and the third video is about my experience in launching a new product. In this video, I'll start off with a bit of history about me growing up, then I'll mention my education before going into my work history. I grew up in South East London and my family have historically worked in law and finance, but my dad was the undercover engineer of the family as he loved taking cars apart and putting them back together. So I think he had the biggest influence on my career. I remember having lots of structural building toys as a kid. I had Meccano at my grandparents' and I had Connects at home. And my mum used to hound me with stories of how I used to take the VCR apart. Dad always insisted on doing push bike maintenance with me and pretty much taught me how to build stuff. He also helped me survive on my first ever motorbike that broke down whenever it rained. I started to properly own that engineering streak in me when I joined Air Cadets at 13 years old, which is when I decided I wanted to be a fighter pilot in the RAF. So at 16, I left school and went straight to Bromley College to study a BTEC National Diploma in Mechanical Engineering. At some point in college, I realised that I didn't really want to go and fight in a war, so I kind of lost focus on being a pilot. But I still loved building stuff, so engineering was still definitely the way forward for me. So straight after college, I went to City University to study a BEng in Mechanical Engineering. My first job after uni was a parts and after sales assistant at Warr's, Harley, Davidson and Buell, where I was selling aftermarket parts, motorcycle apparel and managing the workshop. After that, I was doing project management in the conservation industry, running projects in and around London's green spaces and waterways. This led me to a job in Iceland, the country, not the shop, where I was taking teams around the national parks to work on trailway construction projects. So the projects were mostly replacing and building bridges, as well as constructing boardwalks and stairs. When the job ended for the winter, I came back to London and I realised I couldn't move up the food chain in the conservation industry unless I took my manager's job. So I thought it was time to turn back to engineering. I started welding stairs with one of my friends from the Harley Davidson scene, which kind of tied in with what I was doing in Iceland. We installed stairs in pubs, replaced a few fire exits, and I was also doing some admin and CAD work. The CAD work was mainly for working out the bill of materials to quote jobs and to do some basic regulation drawings. Nothing fancy at all, but just having the chance to mess around on the programs was enough to get me hooked. I just wanted to do design and I needed to get in with a bigger firm. After not getting a graduate role immediately after uni, I decided that the easiest way for me to get into a larger engineering firm was to go in through sales or some other role besides engineering. So I got a job in retail to get my sales skills up and I started targeting jobs in big engineering firms. After a few months, I landed an estimating role with a medical equipment manufacturer. This manufacturer provides large infrastructural equipment for hospital operating theatres, so not the smaller kind of medical devices. These large devices were like operating lights that are installed into the ceiling, computers that are built into the walls, some freestanding stuff like trolleys and operating tables, and these things called medical gas pendants, which ended up being a humongous focus of my time at this company. These medical gas pendants are basically big metal boxes that are suspended from the ceiling and hang down the side of the operating table. Sometimes these boxes are suspended on articulated arms so you can move it horizontally around the operating theatre, and some of them are just the box that moves vertically up and down. The box or pendant holds important services like plug sockets, connections to medical gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, or even vac suction. It has shelves to hold equipment, and all of this could weigh up to 250 kilograms. So the idea is you put a piece of equipment that's attached to the patient onto one of the shelves. Then you can plug it into the socket, you can plug it into the gas services and have it sitting next to the patient without anything trailing on the floor. As an estimator, I was supporting the sales team in building tender proposals for this equipment for new build hospitals. To create these quotes, there was a lot of trawling through building drawings, developing costing spreadsheets, being the interface between our technical team and the building contractors, working with our contracts managers to develop the terms and conditions of each job, as well as working closely with the sales team on the pricing of the job. I loved this job and I got the best experience in doing costings and large-scale project management. I was also in the best position to replace one of the design engineers when he decided to leave the company. So I moved into a CAD Project Engineer role. And I also moved to the manufacturing plant in Leicester. There were two aspects to this CAD role. Firstly was the manufacture of these medical gas pendants, and secondly was the CE marking of the equipment trolleys. In terms of manufacturing the medical gas pendants, I was customizing the design of the pendant to the job we'd won. So this would look like customizing the electrical and gas services on the pendant head, which was mostly sheet metal work, doing the wiring diagrams, customizing the structural configuration of the pendant, like the size of the arms and the box, doing the technical drawings for the contractor with our specifications, and creating the job pack for the shop floor to pick the parts and build the pendant. On the CE marking front, my project was an investigation into the failure of one of our equipment trolleys. Just to set the scene a bit, these trolleys help with the transfer of the patient from the operating theatre to the recovery bay. The life-saving medical devices that are attached to the patient is moved off of the pendant and onto the trolley and can then be moved around with the bed around the hospital. Firstly, I locked myself in a room for 3 weeks and digested the 400-page CE marking document for medical devices. After that, I recovered the trolley from the hospital and started to dig into what went wrong. I created mock-ups of the equipment that they were attaching to the trolley and didn't need to run the test to see that it was overloaded. My mission was to make the trolley safe for the exact equipment that they wanted to use on it and get it back to the hospital as soon as possible. After setting up the certification test, I did iterations of modifying the trolley and running the test until it passed. I wrote up the reports, updated the warnings in the documentation and the warning stickers on the trolley itself. Then I got it back to the hospital and got a statement with a signature from them acknowledging the loading warnings. During the last year of my time at that company, it was bought out by a PLC and it was a very aggressive takeover. Pretty much all of the higher management got kicked out as soon as it was sold. It stunted my growth because the company was unstable and the information flow completely stopped just because people were so scared for their jobs. So I started thinking about my next career move. So just to be clear, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. This was no one's fault. I've heard before that this is the way some takeovers can fall out. So when I was doing the trolley investigation, I had some exposure to the smaller medical devices and it really interested me. They were so much more aesthetic and modern than the big metal hanging boxes that I was dealing with. I also felt like I could have a little bit more autonomy and put my stamp on a smaller product. So my whole search was focused around the CAD program SolidWorks and smaller injection molded products. Then I landed a design engineer role with a washroom equipment manufacturer based in Sussex. This manufacturer produces things like toilet roll holders, sanitary bins, towel dispensers and soap dispensers, all injection molded and therefore SolidWorks heavy products. The first year was spent updating parts and assemblies of existing products and getting to know the industry, which was quite opposite to my previous role in metalwork. I was moving from low volume, high cost to high volume, low cost. In the second year, I was assigned the development of their new concept soap dispenser under the guidance of a manager who was a bit of a SolidWorks guru. This soap dispenser was the first one in the range to have a reservoir just to keep up with the market trends. It was a lot of investigation in determining how to get the soap out of the bottle and into the reservoir and making it so simple that a child could do it. By the end of my initial concept research, the workshop looked like some sort of crazy biolab. I was never much of a sketcher because I've always worked with my hands. So my version of concept development was raiding the workshop and sticking bottles and tubes and bits of plastic together. This was me brainstorming how the fluid was going to flow through the system and figuring out what was realistic and what wasn't. For me, this is R&D prototyping at its best, and I was so lucky to have the opportunity to work like this. I love hands-on prototyping as I really do feel it's the quickest way to get to working solutions. I did a lot of R&D into seals, springs, valves, clips, pumps, and reverse engineering of other products that have similar fluid processes. For example, the valve at the bottom of your coffee machine water tank, and making sure it's not patented, obviously. Once I had a working concept down, I moved to SolidWorks. I had to transpose all of my ideas from the wall in the workshop into SolidWorks and into the same space as one of the existing soap dispensers. I did 3 iterations of fully working 3D printed prototypes, which had about 25 parts each. and then I sent the project out to tender for injection moulders to quote. I did a cost study across the suppliers, and I also compared their lead times, their experience and their communication skills. As soon as one of the suppliers were awarded the job, they started the tooling manufacturing process. A couple of months later, I had my T1 samples, or in other words, my injection moulded ABS prototypes. After 3 rounds of fine-tuning the ABS prototypes, I started the field trials and installed the soap dispenser around our offices. Whilst the field trials were going on, I was doing longevity testing, like doing 1 million pumps of the soap dispenser. I was building jigs to make production line assembly quicker. Also packaging design and creating all the documentation like technical drawings, assembly instructions, and also the literature for the customer. Once I finished all the major design changes, I started to slowly hand the project off to our junior design engineer and started to work on the other projects. So that brings me to the end of all of my corporate experience, and I hope this gives you a bit of an idea of how I work. This is obviously a super high overview of the roles that I've worked in, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So feel free to drop me a message if you'd like to know more. As I mentioned earlier, in the next video, I'll be talking about my freelancing journey and what I've been doing since my corporate work. Thank you so much for listening, and I do hope to see you again soon.